This is part number 4 of the Biblical Doctrine of Business and Economics, and we have dubbed it with the acronym DEBTS, the Divine Economic and Business Transaction Systems. Now, one of the reasons that we have done this, as we saw originally, is that in order to live, you have a debt, and it must be paid. And that debt, of course, is eating. There's much else, drinking, things like water, and having air to breathe, and shelter, and clothes, and so forth. But the most direct thing is eating, and that, of course, is associated with the curse. So we found out that a debt is defined as what is needed for life and livelihood. We have to pay our debts as a result of the curse. And also it's what is given as a result of services performed. And then lastly, what is owed or obligated. You know, in thinking of drinking water, it reminded me with the Fa La La. You know, a lot of those tunes were written in German beer halls, and I could just imagine Martin Luther, I'm not sure if he wrote that one or not, but over a tankard of ale. He was a good theologian, but he never was able to give up that tankard of ale. It's like Charles Spurgeon, the Prince of Preachers. He's one of the greatest preachers next to Paul that's ever lived, and he used to smoke great big long cigars. And anyway, he's never able to give those things up. But be that as it may, I can just imagine after about 2 or 3 of these big German tankards, he said, I'm going to write a Christmas song. And he couldn't think of the words after the verse, and he said, la 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 la. He just wrote those things down. Well, anyway, we saw that business has a definition of what as well. It's what you do. It's your primary employment, what you do as an occupation, what takes up most of your time. Again, because of the curse, you have to give a greater percentage of your time to earn a livelihood. And so therefore you have to master certain professional skills, or at least be willing to give the strength of your body in exchange for food. But generally, a business is that interchange of goods that have been produced, which you sell, which you then buy other goods, and then also the performing of technical services. We all should understand this. But also we should understand an economy. Philosophically, it's important to note that we are moving from a free market economy to a political economy. Why is that important? It's important because in divine establishment, business and government are independent institutions. And when government starts creating jobs, and when government starts meddling with business, then you move from a free market, which is what America was based on, to a socialistic economy known as a political or governmental economy. But again, generally an economy is the management and movement of resources in order to produce something, because people are in debt to live because of the curse. They always will be. You will always be hungry just a few hours after you eat a meal. That's always going to be true, and you have to pay that debt or die. All right. Now, we noted then that because of this, there is an interpretation of history. Nations rise and fall economically because not of the movement of materials toward the masses, but of a spiritual movement toward God. Economically, we find that Karl Marx actually had the one who is the father of socialism and communism. He had a theory of economic determinism or dialectical materialism. And that is that he looks at history and he says, here are these hungry masses. And that nations become successful as they learn how to move materials toward the masses of people rather than simply toward one. Now, for those who want a modern-day version of that, if you have ever watched the Star Trek series, they are pushing towards socialism. Now, I've been a Trekkie, but I don't at all endorse what they teach. Spock says to Kirk, the good of the many, he says, is more important than the good of the few or the one. Now, they got that right from Karl Marx. That's socialism, and that's nonsense. When Jesus Christ hung upon the cross of Calvary, God the Father was watching over it, and His good, you see. The work of the cross was more important. The one who stayed true and faithful to Him was more important. The one who did not commit any individual or personal sins against the Father was more important than the world. If God had to choose at that minute, of course He didn't, and that's the story of the cross and redemption. But if God had His druthers, He would much rather choose His beloved Son over a world of nothings, lost, undone, undeserving of His grace. So, socialism must be rejected by fundamental Christianity. Well, what do we believe in? It's known as spiritual determinism. That God sends blessings according to, collectively especially, according to the condition of the heart. If you have a group of people, let's just say people like the Somalis, the Ethiopians, or what have you, that have tragedy hit them in a busted economy or weather conditions, this has been brought about because collectively they're hardening their heart against the light of the gospel, and God says enough's enough. And He snuffs them out, and that's what happens. Now, of course, today, in our socialistic mentality, the global socialism is setting in, we have to now use things like Marines in a military effort for humanitarian purposes. We have to help. Brother has to help brother. Well, we're never going to save those people from themselves, and that's the whole point. Volitionally, you can go in, and as long as you point a gun, you can feed these people. But until collectively they start changing their minds. Now, they were influenced by communism. They're influenced by the Muslim philosophy nationally. Until they start changing their minds, God's going to continue to judge them. Temporarily, you might stave off the judgment, but again, it's going to come crumbling in. And what happens is that other countries must pay the price by working double, paying double to keep other men alive. And that, of course, doesn't work. It has never worked. So, the course of history is determined by spiritual factors. And Jesus Christ said, "The flesh profits nothing. Labor not for the meat that perishes. The words that I speak to you, they are spirit, they are life." Head toward the spiritual words, the spiritual things of life. God will provide the material. All right, now we saw that then under the concepts of the trees of the garden. We have forgot a third classification of the trees. We focus on the tree of life, the spiritual, the tree of death, the material, but we forget that there were trees representing temporal life. But they also represent a fantastic concept of economy. What is more efficient? What is more economical? What is more productive than to simply walk through the garden and have creation serve you? Would you like an orange, Adam? He took an orange. Would you like a banana? He simply took a banana. The trees handed him the food. But because he chose the material, the tree of death, he was outside of the garden, and now what does he have to do? He has to bend over he has to bend his back over and face the ground. I told my local chiropractor that. He said, "I've never seen that before, but I'll tell you what, it's good for my business." I believe that's true. Okay, so in one instance, the ground becomes a servant. Because of your skills, you develop something that allows creation to serve you. On the other hand, those that head toward the material, focusing toward the masses, the ground becomes your master. And so therefore we have divvied up for you 4 concepts of economy. Individualism, where the person is responsible for himself, basically. He's not his brother's keeper, with certain exceptions. Then capitalism, then socialism, then communism. On the one hand, it tends toward the spiritual, mental, and then you have a proper attitude toward the material. Spiritual first, then you have capacity to handle material blessings as God sends them your way. On the other hand, it's material first. Getting materials to the masses is most important. then the mental. And of course, that's where we are today in America. That's why our schools are crumbling. That's the mentality. Get the material first. That's the most important. Forget about the academics. Book learning is no good. It is impractical. Just get the technical to work for the masses. Now, again, that's wrong, and we'll show you why. And then, of course, there is a push toward the moral aspect with liberal religion. Okay, let's move on then to some new material in Matthew chapter 20. Now, the question that I had was, with regard to this, is this not socialism? Because everybody got the same pay at the end of the day. And of course the answer is absolutely not. Though they did receive the same daily wage, the obvious conclusion is they did not receive the same hourly wage. Their services, even though their services were most probably as average as any of the other laborers, their services became more valuable to the employer as the day wore on. Now that's the principle. Make your services or your skills valuable to an employer, and he's going to pay you what you're worth, hopefully. If we all got what we're worth, we probably wouldn't get minimum and under, but anyway, be that as it may, Jesus Christ is teaching a principle here that comes from chapter 19. Chapter 19 is the story of the rich man who wouldn't give up all to serve him. Now that's the point. The rich man loved his riches. So verse 23 in chapter 19 says, "Verily I say to you that a rich man who will not sell all and give to the poor," in that present time in history, remember, kingdom communism was in effect. Now that is an exception to the rule. The rule in Israel was free market economy or free enterprise. But the exception was, if you've got to take the mark of the beast, sell everything. That material product is not worth keeping if you have to take the mark. Sell it. But under the normal or natural rule of things, you need to learn a skill to profit, to earn money for your livelihood. So he's teaching this lesson about how hardly shall a rich man enter into the kingdom of heaven. But he says, verse 27, in answer to Peter, who says, "Behold, we've forsaken all and followed thee. What shall we have?" He said, in the regeneration. Now note, there's a valuable principle for us here as Christians. Jesus Christ acquired only maximum spiritual wealth in this life. He wasn't president of a big corporation. He didn't own houses or lands. He was never crowned king in this life. He never had anything. One coat, one good piece of clothes. Didn't have a house. He didn't have a bed. But the emphasis was this: he became poor for our sakes that we might be rich. To show that dialectical materialism, communism and socialism, the present administration in the United States of America, that doesn't count. The most important thing is that an individual stays true to God. He had maximum spiritual wealth in his soul. Now, men like Abraham also had maximum spiritual wealth, and God chose to bless them materially. But see, that again, that's a different subject. Jesus was born at the time when it was the end of the 483 years of Nebuchadnezzar's prediction. The 7 years tribulation were on the horizon, and so therefore he said, the kingdom is at hand, sell, give to the poor. Who were the poor? He was the poor. To see us through the economy of the world, the global economy that Antichrist is going to set up, so that we don't have to take the mark of the beast, you see. So you have to keep that in mind. But he said, in the regeneration, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, there's where your reward is going to be. Ye which have followed me in the regeneration. Synonym, millennial kingdom. When the Son of Man shall sit on the throne of his glory, you'll sit on thrones. Everyone that has forsaken houses, verse 29, brother, sister, father, mother, wife, children, lands, for my name's sake shall receive 100-fold and shall receive everlasting life. Many that are first shall be last, and the last shall be first. It just simply means this, that there were those who came on the scene first who are going to get compensated in the very same way as those who came on the scene last. So that if you give up, no matter where you are in God's economy, in the dispensation of law, in God's history rather, under this dispensation, the principle of recompense is the same. So now he comes with this parable. The kingdom of heaven is likened to a householder, and he went early in the morning. Now early in the morning is 6 a.m. in the morning. He had agreed with the laborers for a penny. He sent them into his vineyard. So what we have here is a field with a vineyard on it, and he has to get these grapes to the vat. Now note, he had a time limit, a day. Harvest had to come while it was yet day. The night comes when no man can work. And so therefore, he probably already, now this is probability here, he probably had already taken the grapes from all the other quadrants of his vineyard, and he had this last field, and he had to get them in. He didn't want the fruit to spoil. Besides that, it may be a good bonus for him if he supervised. You know, that's what a steward is. The Apostle Paul called himself a steward of the mystery. Economia. He was a steward. He was an economics professor. He was a master at economics. That's what it is. One who learned how to dispense the good of his household to make a profit and to keep everybody alive and prosperous in that household. Paul was an economist. That's why economy is important to study biblically, because dispensations are divine economies. So, Jesus is simply teaching a principle of economy here. Now, it just so happened, now wanting to be efficient, he hired so many laborers. But what did he find out? Well, he didn't have enough to get all the grapes into the vat in a day. They were beginning to run behind on schedule. So what did he do? He went, verse 3, the third hour, this is at 9 o'clock, and saw others standing and said, go to the vineyards, what is right I'll give to you. They went their way. He went again the 6th hour, noon, the 9th hour, did likewise. And about the 11th hour, now remember the Jewish workday, according to the book of Leviticus, is from 6 to 6. At 6 o'clock in the evening, you get paid your daily wage. He went out the 11th hour at 5 o'clock and did likewise, and found others. Why do you stand here? Because no man's hired us. He said, get to the vineyard. What is right, I'll give to you, you see. And so therefore, what he is doing is saying, I need your services. Even though your skills are just as average as anybody else, I need them right at this moment to get all of the grapes into this vat by the end of the day. Now the principle is simply this. Their skills their services became more valuable to that employer in order to meet his deadline. So what did he do? Free market economy. He went to the marketplace and hired them. Now there was nothing that the government did in saying, you've got to do this, you've got to do the other, you've got to hire this one. He just simply came and said, you look like you've got a strong back, I'll hire you. Then he came the next time and the next time and the next time, and he said, look, I really need to get this moving. I'll pay you what is right if you'll go. It's valuable to me if you'll go work. So, these other fellows worked for a day, approximately 10 to 12 hours. This last fellow worked, he came there at 5 o'clock and paid his at 6. He worked for 1 hour. So, all of these fellows, if we were It's difficult to bring this down into today's terms unless we did a little calculating here. But these fellows got a lesser hourly wage. But what did they have originally? The security of a job. They could work. They could have done the job and gotten paid the wage and finished it off. And so therefore, the risk is falling upon the employer in hiring these people. They had no risk. So therefore, the risk, the field, the capital, everything on top, the employer should get the maximum profit and benefit from it. These people now are selling their services to this employer. But the important thing to note here is that these others became more valuable, and he would pay in accordance with their value to him. Do you want to be valuable to an employer? Learn skills that are valuable to business, and you'll be hired, and you will be paid what you're worth. All right? So now we have a situation here. Yeah, please remember, and I had some to leave the church whenever I hit this matter of the labor unions. If you will check where labor unions came from, they came right from the international brotherhoods formed by, guess who? Karl Marx, the father of modern-day socialism. Why? So that the masses of people can control production. That is the material. That's the tree of death. You should master a skill, and it's individual. It's not collectivism. It's individual. What am I worth? Because you might be worth more than this other guy here, and the employer says, I am going to fire you because you're not worth it. You don't show up for work on time. You don't do I'm going to fire you. And so the International Brotherhood says, you can't do that. I'm going to make him equal. You're going to keep him on staff. And see, that's where they're wrong. If they have the right to say this, then the employer has the right to say that. And if the employer has the right to say, get to the field, and they say, I will not go, then the employer has the right to hire somebody to fill, scabs or not, they have the right. That's their land. Just like you, if you're going to hire somebody to mow your lawn, and they say, I won't do it unless you pay me $10. Well, all I'm going to pay is $5. Well, then I fire you. I'm not going to give you the money. Do you see a lawnmower fellow with a little placard here telling everybody, International Brotherhood of Lawnmower Fellas, Local 97, don't go to this man's house because he will not pay me what's right. You see, you say, well, that's my money. It is your money. That's the point. It is your money. And if you don't want to pay those wages, you don't have to. They can work for what we get. Now, again, free market economy balances out. It's when the government tampers or the masses tamper with production that causes the imbalance of what we have. Those that have the capital can't keep paying out to the masses without reinvesting in the material, without maintenance of the materials and the plants and the business. You can't do it. And so therefore, that's what this guy said. But note, he was fair. He said to them, verse 10, when the first came, they supposed they should have received more. They likewise received every man a penny. They murmured against the goodman of the house. These have wrought but 1 hour, and you made them equal with us. Now, actually, that is not true. The daily wage was true, the hourly wage was not. Money paid for energy exerted was not equal, and that's the point. They were more valuable, he paid them more. But he answered, said, friend, I do thee no wrong. Didn't you agree with me at the beginning of the day for a penny? Yeah. Didn't I give you a job? Yeah. Isn't that what you were looking for? Yes, absolutely. And so I took the risk. I'm giving you the money. I hired you. Take what is thine and go. I will give unto the last, even as unto thee. Is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? If an employer says, this person's more valuable, I need to pay him more money, that's his business. And what it is instead of looking to God to control economy, we look to the masses to control. And that is what Antichrist government is. When the masses control, will not have this man to rule over us, the mark of the beast. It is the control of goods and production, not for the glory of God, but to oust Jesus Christ. Is it not lawful for me to do what I will with mine own? Now notice what he calls their intentions. Is thine eye evil because I'm good? I've done what's right. This guy was valuable to me, so I paid him accordingly. I did what was right according to the scale of things. So the last shall be first, and the first shall be last. Many called, few chosen. So that is the concept here of the free market and of services being paid in accordance with your own personal value to an employer rather than a collective value to an employer. All right. Now, that brings us then to divine establishment. If you want to talk about something difficult, just talk about these management-labor relations as I just did, even in a spiritual context, because people do not understand that God is the owner of all things, and unless we play His ball game, believe on the Lord Jesus Christ, we're out. We have nothing. What shall a man gain the whole world and lose his own soul? So it's more important to go from the top down than from the masses up. We're going to see this a little bit later, but it's very difficult. Again, as I said, I had wanted to leave the church on that account because I talked several times to this person, and as they said, you hit labor unions. Now, there is a place for them, but it is never to hurt the employer. Never to hurt the employer. Never. Why do I say that? Simply because the Apostle Paul tells servants and their masters, labor and management, do what you're told, not answering again. That's difficult, isn't it? Child, if your father says it, do what you're told, not answering again. Citizen, if the officer says to do this, better do what you're told, not answering. He bears not the sword in vain. Now, I'm talking about legitimate things. If the employer is asking you to jump off a 100-foot bridge and you say no, well, that's fine. But then again, you have the freedom to walk off the job and say, I don't want this, I'll work elsewhere where my safety is considered. See, it balances out. You want good people to work for you, you're going to consider their safety. All right, so it's important to divine establishment. Saw something in a newspaper the other day that tickled me pink. A cartoonist. Shortly after the movie Malcolm X came out, the cartoonist had Spike Lee, who was the director and producer of the film, holding up a t-shirt. Now above him was a sign. He had set up a little store in a mall. And of course the epitome of free enterprise, a little store in the mall, and above him said Malcolm X t-shirts, hats, and so forth, all the paraphernalia that went along with the movie. And he held the t-shirt up, and on the t-shirt was a quote of Malcolm X. And the quote was this: show me a capitalist and I'll show you a bloodsucker. Now that's fantastic. This dude is making millions of dollars off of that movie promoting socialism, not capitalism. Now how it's hypocritical, come on. It's absolutely hypocritical. But then again, Spike Lee gets all the TV cameras on him to promote his particular cause. Where's the fundamentalist preacher that doesn't pay through his nose to get on TV to spread the true message of the gospel? And he gets free advertising. As you can see, business and economy, the new administration and your pastor do not see eye to eye and will never see eye to eye unless they get saved and they get doctrinal, which they are not on either count. All right. Business and nation. Adam Smith says this. Who is Adam Smith? He is the father of modern day capitalism. He says, governmental intervention in business retards the progress of society towards real wealth and greatness. You see, in a socialistic economy, Those who work hard have to drag on their coattails those who do not work hard. In a free economy, everyone is allowed to go to their own level. You want to work? You get busy and work. You don't? Then you go to your own level, and it's not up to me to bring you up to my standard. That's the point. And as far as he is concerned, government has a threefold role. Maintain the military. That is, that they protect us as a government. It's interesting. What's the first thing the new administration has done? Downscale the military. Downscale the military. President Bush says, you better watch, because things in this volatile world can turn around overnight to where the superpowers that now seemingly no longer superpowers can become a superpower real fast. Better watch it. You better keep alert militarily. But let's downscale it and do the things they're doing to it. To maintain our borders, to keep outside foes from invading us and doing what? Changing our government. If Russia invaded us, what would they do? They would make us communist if we were still alive. Okay, the second thing is to maintain a constabulary. What is a constabulary? A police force. That's inside. Now, again, that means they are to protect three types of entities. They are to protect your person. The Declaration of Independence says, or the Constitution says, Declaration of Independence says, life, your person. Liberty, your privacy. The pursuit of happiness, your property. And if you earn the wealth, you have a right to keep the wealth and enjoy it. If you've made so many thousands of dollars a year legitimately through hard work, and this concept of robbing from the rich to give to the poor who have not earned it legitimately, who do not own up to life, that's robbery. That's not justice. That's robbery. Take from the rich. Now again, if you are a mean ogre, the sheriff of Nottingham, and you are simply robbing people and keeping them paupers, that's a different story. But in a free market economy where the government keeps everyone free, that's different. That's not possible to rob from the rich and take from the poor unless you start heading toward a political economy which taxes the rich to make the poor equal in a reallocation and a redistribution of wealth. You want wealth? Do it as the man says, the old-fashioned way. Earn it with a job, with skills, getting up off your duff like the rest of us have to do, and learn things, do things, and provide a service for people or an employer. All right, so the pursuit of happiness is property. If you want a certain type house and you have to pay taxes to this guy who doesn't work to make him equal with you in a certain time, and only this type of house is going to make you happy, then that's not fulfilling the government's role, is it? You have a right to pursue happiness, and if you want to live in this kind of house and you can earn it and do it, then you do it. But to have somebody who doesn't earn it take it from you, they're keeping you from your what? Happiness. If they want that house, let them work for it too. That's the point. Now, I'm not saying, as we teach these lessons, that there are not some problems, there are not some exceptions, there are not legitimately poor people. There are. But free market is better than political market anytime. All right, the last thing they are to do is then to maintain unity. We, the people of the United States, in order to ensure a more perfect what? Union. Establish justice. Robbing from the rich, if they legitimately earned it, to give to the poor is not a just move. Ensure domestic tranquility and so forth. Provide for the general, not specific welfare. And secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves. Liberty ensures that we are all free, not equal. Liberty, freedom. We're all free, but we are not equal. And that, of course, is my last 2 points as we begin closing out here. What does our government then do? Says Adam Smith. Ensure equality of participation in the system. It means that regardless of race, color, creed, or religion, you are allowed to participate in the system. But it does not ensure equality of person. You're in a certain field and you've not developed your skills. Someone else has. That person deserves a right to earn more than you. There's an inequality there. You're a Christian, someone else is not. There's an inequality of person. Can both get saved? Why, absolutely, whosoever will. But only one does and the other chooses not to. There's an inequality of person, but there is an equality of participation. Now we need to get this through our heads. That's how God works. You want to get saved? Everybody can do it. But only those who do get the benefit of everlasting life. So that makes the person who does and the person who doesn't unequal.